Hey everyone, I'm back. And I want to thank you all for the really positive and interesting comments. Tons of them, and the memories that they trigger, and the memories that you share with me. A lot of you guys that have commented were here at various times or had similar interests with cars and race cars and amplifiers and all the crazy stuff we've been talking about here. Uh, I, I wish I could figure out how to reply to a couple of the questions, but when I hit reply, it just plays my video again. So, again, I am the king of digital dummies. I'm the last of the medieval analog vacuum tube thinkers, so I don't expect myself to be able to navigate today's technology because I can't. So, I'm going to answer just a couple of the questions here. And if you don't like this particular version of my ramblings, just remember the next one is free. Any rate, one guy writes, "Oh yeah, that black-haired beauty wiring amps was that? I think she wired one of mine." And yes, this is correct. One of the visions that I've never forgotten and never will, back in the Lagunitas days, when we were doing everything ourselves, very simply out of the house, my daily constitutional was to walk up the steep hillside to Kent Lake, go swimming, and walk back. It was an hour, 20 minutes to get there, 20 minutes back to swim, and 20 minutes coming back with the dogs. And as I came back down through the forest, I looked down on the house, and there, sitting on the back deck in the sun, was Rayven and two other neighbor ladies stuffing circuit boards. Beautiful sunny morning, and they had their tops off. And I thought, don't ever forget this image because this is just too precious. And so, yeah, buddy, that's true. That black hair beauty, that was Rayven, and she put the parts on and soldered up your board. And man, what a pleasure for us to be able to do that. Now, you guys, anybody, there's been a couple of guys that have had questions about repairs, and I can only refer you to Prune Music because most of the repairs are pretty easily. Yeah, Mesa Boogies are more complicated because of the channel, the foot switching, the high gain, the mute circuits. There can be stuff that's a little abnormal and drive some techs crazy. But hey, we have always pride ourselves on the greatest service. Usually a 1 or 2 day turnaround if you have to send your amp in. And for guys that would show up with an amp to drop it off, my directive was, hey, go have lunch, come back in an hour, and we'll have your amp fixed. And so that's the way we used to roll. I can't say how it is right now, but I know Mike Bendinelli is still there after 48 and a half years. And he is the key. Any of these old amps, he is the guy. He knows everything. In fact, I had to several times go to him and ask him, Mike, what's this? And he'd say, oh, remember there was this issue and you fixed it by doing that. And I said, I did? Yeah. Oh, yeah. But hey, Mike is the guy, a precious, precious resource. In fact, since this is all digression and diversion, let me tell you, when I met Teresa, my wife now, and I finally brought her into Prune Music, the first person we met was Mike. And I said, Mike, this is Mike Bendinelli. How long have you worked here, Mike? Now, mind you, this was 9 years ago. I think he said 41 years then, so that would add up to 48 and a half, almost 50 years. Then we walked around to the assembly, and I said, this is Marie. And Marie, bless her, she wires the front panels. She steps down off her stool, puts her arms around me, gives me a hug, looks at Teresa and say, you take good care of our boss because we love him. Of course, I got tears in my eyes from that. The next guy we go to is John Marshall, who has a great history with Metallica, and he is the guy that I have transitioned my brain into. He is the leading design guy there now that I've been fired. And here's what John said. He said, oh yeah, I've worked here for 24 years, and they still call me the new guy. Okay, and again, that was 8.5, 9 years ago or so. That was one of the things that I thought was precious about Boogie, is that it was a lifetime gig for so many people, almost most of the people, and that enabled them to actually buy a house, raise a family, and be devoted to the craftsmanship that I think a musical instrument deserves. Okay, one thing that I went back to that I forgot to say that's a crucial thing when I was talking about the Boy Scout wood carving deal and the guy who gave me the death ray and sawed up my lame ass wood carvings. I told you all of that, but I forgot to tell you his theory, which was that every time you make something, you're leaving behind a permanent artifact of your values at that time. It was after he said that he said, and if this is the best you can do, Sonny, either you're hopeless or you didn't try very hard. So you're leaving behind an artifact of your values at that time. And when you look at that later, are you going to cringe? Are you going to say, hey, well, that was the best I could do then. I'm doing better now. But yeah, the best you could do. That's the key. Okay, another guy said, I don't know what Santana is talking about needing to get sustain, because I put a tube screamer in front of a bandmaster and I can get great sustain. Yeah, that's great. But back then, there wasn't a tube screamer. Matter of fact, I think you could make the argument that the tube screamer was a great product because it tried to get the sustain that the Boogs invented at that time, and to get the performance characteristics. Obviously, a tube screamer has become a hugely important and significant piece of gear. So yeah. Another guy said, oh, yeah, well, heavy metal, you could get heavy metal from a Marshall. True that. And as he says, but you had to turn it up too loud. And as I mentioned, that was almost the death knell of our lame little band, blues rock band, Martha's Laundry. Was the guy saw Eric Clapton, the guitar player Jim Lehman. And so he goes out and buys a full Marshall stack. And I have to get my tone. Yeah, well, by the time you get your tone, everybody's ears are bleeding and they're leaving the club. One other guy said, was there somebody named Lewis Jones who he claimed he was an engineer at Mesa Boogie? Well, I've never heard of Lewis Jones, so I don't think he was there. Then another thing I can guarantee you is there are no engineers at Mesa Boogie. I'm not, Mike's not, John Marshall isn't, nobody is, and we're better off for it. No offense to engineers. They do wonderful things that I couldn't even dream of doing. But in terms of radical, out-of-the-box, crazy ideas, the goal of engineering is predictability. Now, if you're building a bridge, you don't want me designing it. You want the guy that knows it's predictable that damn bridge is going to hold up. So, and another guy asked, well, what about Dumble? There's a story about with Neil Young and the $15,000, blah, blah. No, it was actually $1,000 that Dumble, he called himself Howard Dumble in those days, and then he changed it to Alexander. That doesn't matter, whatever he wants. Neil was getting ready to go out on the road, and he had this huge problem of the light dimmers putting this giant buzz on his amps, which were a bunch of old tweed Fenders. And so he said, can anybody fix this? And he had reached out to me and to Howard Dumble. I had already been down to Neil's ranch several times and worked on his amps individually. Great guy, brilliant guy, and very, very particular and knows what he's talking about when it comes to amps and tone. Any rate, so yeah, the light dimmers are on. There's huge big buzz on the amplifiers. And Dumble has this giant thing that looks like it's out of a sci-fi thing. And Neil says, well, let's hear it. And Dumble says, give me $1,000 and I'll show it. And Neil goes, well, you show me it works, then I'll give you the $1,000. And they went back and forth 3 or 4 times. And Dumble wouldn't move. He said, you give me the $1,000, I'll show you it works. And Neil said, I'll give you the $1,000 after you show me it works. So Dumble packed up his stuff and left. And next up, he said, well, what about you? Meaning me. And I'm kind of intimidated here because, man, these guys know more than I do. And I looked at these, what was it, 6 amps? There were 2 410 Basemans, 2 blonde Bandmaster stacks, and 2 Tweed Twins all plugged in together. And I thought, well, we got a bunch of ground loop going on here. So I went and got out of my toolbox a bunch of those little ground float things that you plug in and put those in, and then messed with the ground switches, and the buzz went away. And Neil said, well, how much do I owe you? And I said, nothing. What, you want to buy they're 35 cents. How many do you need? So at any rate, I ended up, this is actually, here we are diverting, but I guess you guys like that. So Rayven and I are asleep. It's about 12:30 a.m. The phone rings. I'm bleary-eyed. Yeah, what? It's Leo Makota, and he's out on the road with Neil. And he says, you have just enough time to make it to San Francisco International, where there's a first-class ticket on Northwest Airlines for you. And I said, what? Huh? Wait a minute. He said, no, pack your shit and get on that plane. I don't have time to talk. I said, wait a minute. I'm not sure. You will be on that plane. I'm hanging up now. Click. And Rayven says, what was that? And I said, I'm not sure, but it sounded like they want me to get up right now and catch this early morning flight to Madison, Wisconsin, which I did. Packed my shit, went down to yep, here's the ticket. Those days were much easier, I got to tell you. That was pre-TSA and all that. So I'm bleary-eyed. It's like 5:30, quarter to 6 a.m. in Madison, Wisconsin. I haven't slept. Here come my toolboxes on the conveyor. And as I'm reaching for them, this guy in full livery steps up. Are these yours, sir? And I go, yeah. And he grabs them. Follow me. And so out we go, and out in front, here's this white limo that's about a half a block long. I've never ridden in a limo before. And as we approach, the rear door opens, and out comes this arm, and in the hand is a buck knife with a blade about that long, with a line of cocaine down the whole thing. And the line is, here, take this, you're going to need it. The door closed, off to big time rock and roll. Hey, thanks, Neil. That wasn't Neil. That was Leo Makota, who was a former Army Ranger, Green Beret, I think he was, and he was a road manager. He did a great job. And that was the Harvest Tour. At any rate, blah, blah, blah. What else do I got here? I seem to have hit a nerve with the mountain biking too, but I forgot one of the main guys. I mentioned Charlie Kelly, but I didn't mention his buddy Gary Fisher. And I got this book right here. See, this is high tech. This is the way you get a picture in my world. You hold it up to the camera. That's Charlie Kelly. That's the cover of this book, Fat Tire Flyer, Repacking the Birth of Mountain Biking. And man, that's true. And there he is. I mean, look at the guy. He's got the knee pads, the boots. This guy is tough. This is a heavy athletic deal to go screaming down the mountain. And these guys crashed and tore up their knees and broke their freaking legs and ankles and stuff like that. Hey, part of the gig. This it kind of leads into the whole X game thing here, that because it's just doing insane stuff. So yeah, Gary Fisher, and a matter of fact, he had the brand. I think there was a Fisher bike, and I don't even know the whole business complication, but that's back to that same era where Lee Michaels predated the whole go-kart deal, which of course is essential to anybody driving race cars. A lot of people have asked about that, and they've said, well, what are those cars on the back? Well, let's just take one of them. Let's take this one, my favorite. This is the guy said, is that an Atlantic? And it's not quite an Atlantic. It's, Jesus, all the reflection. It's a Brabham BT29. It's a Formula B, which became Formula Atlantic, which is a feeder series. that ultimately, if you're talented enough and stick with it, it goes to Formula One. That's the car up there. Well, you can't see me pointing. That's that one. We'll get to that later. Because again, you stair step up on these cars. You do not get into one of these cars and drive it. It takes it takes a little bit of background. So I started off with a Lotus Super 7, which is what I always wanted my little bug-eye Sprite to be. In fact, when I saw them at the races at Laguna Seca, I was knocked out. I was like, what are those funny-looking things that are just wailing? They're kicking everybody's ass. So when I was, I think, 48 years old, I got one, and I'd seen it out at Sears Point running. And I told the guy, I said, hey, if you ever want to sell that car, call me. He said, oh, I'm never going to sell this car. Well, he did. He changed his mind. And he said, I think I'll sell it. You want to come down to San Jose? So I went down to pick up the car. That was the very day, because his wife came running out and said, you got to see this. You got to see this. O.J. Simpson is driving down the freeway with this whole cavalcade of cop cars following him. Any rate, so I got that Lotus, had a great time with it. That's all I wanted. I thought, that's great. And out at Sears Point, which again is not a high-speed track, but it's a high-penalty track, because the penalty for going off, and it's called one of the tracks that separates the men from the boys, because it's very difficult. And a little really nimble car like that Lotus 7, it's right at home there. In fact, I never lost a race to a Corvette, a Porsche, or a Cobra with that little car, with all of its 155 horsepower. And so, again, how you move through the ranks, they put me with all the smaller cars, and it just ran away with it. And they said, okay, we're having to put you in with the big V8 cars, and we're going to start you at the back because they're going to run away from you. And they threw the green flag, and I'm last, and I floored it and immediately passed 5 big muscle cars. Lotus 7 is a bullet up to about 60 miles, 55, 60 miles an hour, and then the air resistance starts to become a factor. This is something that most of you guys wouldn't think about, but in these race cars, really the higher horsepower stuff, the only thing you can really use it for is punching through air as you get going faster and faster, because the resistance of air increases as the square of the speed. So, for example, that Lotus 7, I don't think it would hit 100. I think it would get really close to it, but and maybe it would. I've seen the stats. So you double the power and it goes like 4 miles an hour faster. You double the power again and it goes 2 miles an hour faster. It's total diminishing returns. Any rate, back to this Brabham here. One of the elder statesmen rapped me on the helmet and he said, Rocket Randy, on the pole again. It's time you got a real race car. And I said, Dave, this is a real race car. And he said, don't tell me about Lotus 7s. I was the 3-time national champion in a Lotus 7, but you're ready for more. Come over to my shop. I got a great car. So I go over there with Suzanne. She's wife number 2, passed away in 2015. And we're looking at this Brabham, and it's gorgeous. And I'm thinking, yeah, what a beautiful car, out of my league, and I'm not worthy. And so we're driving away, and she said, well, what do you think of that car? I said, well, it's beautiful, but I'm not worthy. And I don't have the 50 grand to buy that car. And she said, what if I bought it for you? I said, what? She said, no, I'm serious. What if I bought it for you? And then I would never, ever have to get you another present as long as I said, are you serious? Well, she was, and she did. And we took the car out to the track. All the guys gather around and they said, Suzanne, is it true you bought this guy this car? And she said, yeah, look at him. He just turned 50. And I figured I had 2 choices. It was either a BT29 or a 19-year-old blonde. At any rate, I had more fun with that car, but it took me quite a while to come up to being able to drive it. And it's a very easy car to drive, really. But everything is different on these cars. And one of the elder guys saw me struggling a bit, and he said, so what's the deal? And I said, man, this car doesn't seem to have any more grip than my Lotus, and it's got these great big wide tires. And he said, yeah, that's normal, because until you go through this scary transition zone, nothing works right. And the car only works right when everything is warmed up, particularly the tires and the brakes, and it only works right at full boil. And wow, was he ever right about that? Was he ever right about that? So the other thing too was tuning my ear. Now with the Lotus 7, red line probably $7,000, but power actually tapered off about 62. So there's no point in revving it beyond that. With the engine in this car, it only comes to life at 6,000, and you shift it at about 9,000. So, and it's a whole different gearbox. Instead of going ring ring, it's like ring 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 beer beer beer. Everything is really fast on it. And once you're in the groove, it's like flying. Okay, I probably rambled on enough, answered the questions, led to more, and eventually, if you guys are interested, I'd love to tell you some of the racing stories and some of the great guys that I've met through racing. And of course, the best part of Mesa Boogie is all of the great people that I got to meet too. And man, I'm feeling it from you guys sending me all the comments. It's the great people again. So thank you very much. See you later.